Keeper of the Lost Cities Neverseen, Chapter 71. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Thanks! Need some help? Sophie asked Tam as he carried Lynn toward the bridge. I've got her. But every time he lost his balance, Lynn's concentration would falter and the wave would swell higher. Hang on, Lynn, Sophie told her. You can do this. I can, Lynn said, gritting her teeth so hard they looked ready to crack. There will be no flood until we're ready. The ogres roared into a frenzy when Sophie's group reached the bridge. A few even crept to the first fiery arch, hovering near the crater Dex had made, eager to spill the first blood. Let's try to stay in groups through this, Fitz said. No one should be alone. Keith hooked his arm through Sophie's, and Bianna took his arm. Fitz stayed with Tam and Lynn, helping hold Lynn steady as she clung to the edge of the bridge and kept her eyes fixed on the wave. Dex, Calla, and Alvar made a small circle, the two boys each holding Calla with one hand and the silver chest with the other. Don't take any risks to save that thing, Sophie told them, pointing to the chest. It's not worth it. Why not? Alvar said. Brace yourselves, Tam shouted before Sophie could answer. Lynn needs to let the water go. Do it, Sophie said, clinging to the stone railing. With an anguishing cry, Lynn lowered her hands and called the wave toward them. The ogres, who'd crawled out onto the bridge, scrambled back, but Sophie and her friends stayed locked in place, staring down the oncoming flood. It needs to hit us from behind, Dex shouted. Otherwise we'll be crushed against the canyon. Working on it, Lynn said, screaming as she twisted her arms and curved the massive swell as much as she could. For one surreal moment, Sophie and her friends stood, slack-jawed, clinging onto anything they could grab hold of. Then, the tidal wave crashed over them. The bridge cracked on impact, splitting into two parts, showering them with green sparks as the flaming arches toppled. Dex's group was forced to split, and he dragged Calla with him to share the piece of bridge holding Tam, Lynn, and Fitz. Alvar jumped with the silver chest onto the piece of rubble that Sophie, Keith, and Bianna clung to, right as it broke free and took off down the river. Their debris dipped and ducked and thrashed through the white-capped water, rushing so fast the world smeared to a blur. So, not to freak you out more than you already are, Keith shouted, catching Sophie's arm and dragging her back before a smaller wave could wash her overboard. But what happens when we go kaboom? He pointed ahead where the gigantic iron gates were growing larger by the second. Lynn had seemed sure the force of the water and debris would break the gates open, but that didn't explain how they would survive the crash. Time for the famous Sophie Foster to come up with another brilliant plan and save us, right? Alvar asked. But Sophie was out of ideas. Even with all four of their minds combined, their telekinesis strength would never be enough to shove the gates open before they got there. And with the rushing wind and panic pumping through their veins, Sophie didn't see a way they'd ever be able to levitate safely away. Lynn says jump into the river, Fitz transmitted from his raft. She can cushion you in the water. Sophie could think of many things wrong with that plan, but she wasn't in a position to argue. Lynn says we have to jump, she shouted, pulling the others to the edge of their rubble and leaping into the flood. The water was freezing, but it had a strange burn too, like lemon juice in a cut, and the stinging pain made Sophie forget any of the tricks she'd learned in Exilium to hold her breath. The currents knocked the last of the air from her chest, and as the bubbles slipped toward the surface, Sophie followed, kicking her legs frantically, her lungs screaming, her vision dimming, until her head broke through the water and she sucked in a grateful breath. Keith surfaced beside her, and she clung to him. He held on tight and reminded her they had to get underwater for Lynn's protection. Sophie had just enough time to fill her lungs with air before Keith dove, pulling her under with him. She forced herself to swim, ignoring the pain as bits of rubble pummeled them from all sides. She tried to remember that she owned the new record at Exilium for holding her breath. She just needed to slow her body down, slow her lungs down, slow her heart down. An explosion blasted through the water, but as the storm of shrapnel hurtled toward them, it split down the center, half of it drifting over their heads, the other half below their feet. Sophie had no idea how Lynn could control so many things at once, but she sent silent thanks for protecting them as they washed through the blast zone to safety. We're alive! Keith shouted when they surfaced again in the middle of the raging flood. And so are Alvar and Bianna. I can see them a few feet behind us. What about the others? Sophie asked, kicking away debris before it smashed them. I can't see that far, but the gate's open now, so they should have a smooth ride. Plus, they've got Lynn. She'll keep their raft steady. True, Sophie said. You probably should have grouped up with them. Nah, I like my group better. He pulled her closer, just in time to miss a jagged rock. The river rushed at a breakneck speed, waves tossing them back and forth, knocking them into flotsam. They clung to each other until the currents washed them into a bed of broken reeds. Sophie waded out of the shallows, collapsing on the grassy ground and gulping as much air as she could. I think we made it, Keith said, crumpling beside her. Sophie stared at the sky, a red sunset so bold it felt almost violent. Still, she preferred it to the sour green light of Ravagog. Any signs of the others? She whispered. I saw their chunk of bridge washing ashore a while back, Keith said, so I'm betting they're on foot now. Sophie knew they should get up and search, but her body felt like it had been molded from mashed potatoes. The best she could do was lean her head on Keith's shoulder, trying to stay warm in the chilly evening wind. Aw, you guys look so cute, Alvar said, stumbling toward them a few minutes later. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt cuddle time, he added, as Sophie scrambled away. Sophie was sure her cheeks were redder than the sky, especially when she realized Bianna was there too. She pulled her soggy hair forward to cover her face. It's cold here. It is, Bianna agreed. Sophie couldn't tell if the strain in Bianna's voice was exhaustion or something else. She decided to change the subject. Where are we? Near Wildwood, Alvar said, which is good. I was hoping that's where we'd end up. Really? Sophie asked. Why? Alvar lifted the silver chest, which he'd managed to carry through all the chaos. Seemed like a good place to bring this. His smile was so bright Sophie couldn't look at him as she told him the truth. That's not the cure. That's how the ogres were planning to get the plague into the lost cities. They wanted us to seal it and bring it there. Then, when we opened it, poof, the plague would be our fault. Alvar tested the lock on the chest. Are you sure? I saw the whole plan in King Dimitar's mind. He's also plotting to get rid of the Neverseen once he's done using them. He thinks he's using them? Alvar asked. He's using everyone, Sophie said, letting us tear our world apart so he can crush the pieces to bits. Sophie shook her head. We'll have to destroy the chest, and I don't know how I'm supposed to tell Calla there's no cure. I already know, Calla said behind them. Sophie scrambled to her feet to find Calla, Tam, Lynn, Dex, and Fitz shuffling closer. It should have been a moment of celebration. They'd invaded Ravagog and lived to fight another day. But the devastating realities cast a shadow far gloomier than any Tam could create. You know the cure is fake? Sophie whispered. Calla nodded, her eyes focused on what remained of the Wildwood colony in the distance. The Panaches told me. I finally understand their song. The cure lies in their blossoms, not their bark. The hope is not lost. I'll explain how later. Right now, we should get somewhere safe. I'm sure the ogres will come after us. Yeah, Keith said. You guys really just destroyed Ravagog, right? Do you know what this means? Like, did we just start a war? We didn't start anything, Fitz said. This whole thing was the trap the ogres set. Somehow, I don't think King Dimitar is going to care about that, Keith mumbled. He glanced at Sophie. And I'm guessing you didn't learn anything about my mom? I tried, she whispered, but his mind was too fixated on the Draco stones. That has always been the ogre's problem, a frighteningly familiar voice said. They always fail to see the bigger picture. Sophie and her friends scrambled together as they turned to find Brant and Finton walking toward them, each holding spheres of Everblaze.